Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are excited to have this conversation. We really want to address 2 points pertaining to the Heartland Park redevelopment district and the star bonds. It's it's been a long road as we've addressed this, and we want to be very clear that people understand that we're not just proceeding to finish. We think that while most people will agree the technical aspects of the deal were good, it made sense from a city perspective. Some people may have disagreed where the city took a very good beating was in terms of communication, and people didn't feel that they were engaged. We want to make sure that given where we're at today, we don't commit the same situation. So what we're going to do this evening is to really address this in 2 aspects. Number one is I'm going to ask City Attorney Sublette to provide an update as to where we stand on all of the legal issues and other issues that we've been waiting for to clear through the courts and clear through the process. And then a combination of Chad, myself, and Mr. Gerber will talk about some of the procedures for moving forward with your permission, sir.
Mr. Sublette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager. I'd done a count going through the number of times we've discussed Heartland Park publicly with this body. I think we're at number 11, either public hearings, votes, or public discussions. In terms of the legal piece, it's probably the most simple piece to explain at this point. We're all aware that the district court made a ruling some time ago that the city could move forward, that there were some errors in the petition and how it was formulated and some other issues, and that we couldn't have a legally binding vote of any kind based on the purported petition that was put forward. That ruling was upheld by the appellate court about a week ago, I think it was. My time frames are right. They found that the petitioner had utilized the wrong statute, the wrong language, that he needed to proceed under the actual Star Bond Act, which it didn't. So the appellate court again ruled in favor of the city, and there's currently no stay in place, and the stay would be the thing that would prevent us from moving forward. The petitioner, through his attorney, has said even if they do want to try to certify this to the Supreme Court, he's said that he's not going to ask for a stay. So there's nothing in place that prevents the city legally from moving forward at this point. The other issue I want to talk about was legislative post-audit, that there was a audit by the Legislative Post-Audit Committee. And during the course of that audit, they looked at 8 distinct areas to ensure that the Department of Commerce and that the city had proceeded accordingly with going through this process and the proposed amended district. With the leadership of the city manager and the finance department and legal, we worked with legislative post-audit. They worked very expeditiously and very thoroughly. And what they found at the end and what they reported out was that in all 8 areas that they examined, that the proposed Star Bond project was legally appropriate and met all the requirements. In addition, during the course of their presentation, there's been this $160 million economic impact study out there, and that's one of the things they looked at. They said, we couldn't verify the $160 million, but we think it's at least $53 million a year. So that's a significant economic impact on the state of Kansas, the city of Topeka, and that $53 million, they thought it was probably a third of that $160 million. So that's a significant impact on the city of Topeka. In addition, they believe during race weekends it generates 2 to 3 times the amount of sales tax during a race weekend. So we believe that LPA, the Legislative Post-Audit Study, their report to the committee was very positive for the city of Topeka, very positive for the project. I think it's important to note that the Legislative Post-Audit is independent. It is a committee of the legislature. It wasn't the city. It wasn't Jayhawk Racing. It wasn't even the Department of Commerce. It's a committee that gives oversight to projects all over the state. We met with them, we provided documents to them, we did everything that we could to be as transparent and as open as possible. They liked the fact that all of our documents were online. They could see them, they could get them, they could download them. So it was a very good process. In terms of the NHRA, just to touch on that a little bit, the NHRA has agreed verbally that they would do away with the guarantees that are in the current contract, that they're willing to renegotiate that contract over the next 3 years. They see the importance of keeping that race in Topeka. We're located in the middle of the country. It's a valuable race to them, so they've been very cooperative in working with the city, with Corford, with everybody that's been involved in finding a way to make sure that race happens and to have a document that is not punitive, for lack of a better word, to anybody that's going to operate the facility or the city. Once we cleared the significant legal hurdles that were in place, once we cleared the legislative post-audit, the potential operators, those discussions continued somewhat, but obviously with the legal issues, some of those were put on hold. They've restarted again. We're starting to get letters of intent from those groups expressing considerable interest in operating Heartland Park, understanding the investment that's going to need to take place over the next 11 years in Heartland Park, and working with the NHRA. So, as the city manager said, I'm excited to continue these conversations, clear some of the hurdles that were in place, and move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to maybe take a little bit of a hiatus here and allow anybody to ask any questions of Mr. Sublette in terms of any of the specifics pertaining to the legal or the legislative post-audit. What I will do in terms of wrapping up this presentation is talk about the process moving forward and how we do this. So your call if you want to ask questions now or...
Yeah, are there questions at this point from what the overview that Mr. Sublette provided? Councilman Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. Chad, what's the timeline for filing a petition for review for the Supreme Court?
30 days.
From
The 11th, I believe, was when the order was issued.
so so if that appeal is filed and then the Supreme Court decides whether to accept the appeal, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's not appealed as a matter of right?
No.
Okay. So if the Supreme Court agrees to hear the case, what's the timeline at that time?
I have no idea what that timeline would be.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, Mr. Sublette? Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thanks. You talked about somebody operating and investing. Are they aware of the investment that they would have to make to operate out there? Are we making that available? Because that was not real clear to me.
In the RFP, we talked about the investment that would need to be made. In every conversation we've had with every group, we've been very clear about the investment that's going to need to be made over the next 11 years. Everybody is well aware of what that, I believe, is well aware of what that investment would be. It would have to be at the minimum, the match to the Star Bond proceed, the Star Bond sale, which is $5 million, so it's going to have to be over $5 million. And every group that has looked at this understands this is an outdoor racing facility. Over 11 years, there's going to be work that's going to be needed to be done on the track. There's going to be improvements that are going to need to be made that hasn't seemed to be an impediment at all to anybody that would be a manager or operator of the track. But I would.
So what is the total amount? Can you tell me that you've told them?
And in excess of the $5 million to match the Star
$5 million?
Bond. Yeah, when you read what is in the paper, there was the $7 million number, and if you actually read what that says, those are proposals, and that there was $5 million that has to be made to match the bonds, and then the other $2 million were possible projects that could be worked on in the future.
It could be up to $7 million, is what you're saying.
If somebody wanted to, if that investment needed to be made, it could be up to 15, it could be whatever the operator wants to invest in the park, but it has to be at least $5 million.
And they're fully aware of that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and nobody has a problem with that?
Not that I've talked to, but I would defer to the city manager.
Mayor and Councilmember Ortiz, no, we've been as open as we can. There is, specifically within the statute, they talk about a 50% rule, which means that for any public investment, there needs to be a private investment equal to that. And that was one of the things that was specifically looked at by the legislative post-audit pertaining to the city. When we put the plan together, we identified that there were two ways for us to meet the 50% rule. One was the acquisition of the real estate rights, the removal of the reversionary interest provision, and also that we understood that that another way to do that would be the investment of $5 million. I think the more practical impact is nobody can go into Heartland Park and operate it without making those investments. And one of the things that we specifically looked at was not just operate the race facility itself, but look at the entire $700 million. So preference is really being given to somebody who has a plan to program the entire location. So, but to answer your question, yes, we've been very, very open in those conversations about that.
If I may. City manager, what
700 acres.
Yeah, what happens if they don't do that? Then do they break their contract, or what happens if they come in and they say they sign all the papers and they say that they're gonna do it, but that doesn't happen?
Mayor and Councilmember Ortiz, that is something that we will address in the legal documents. We haven't negotiated those at this point, but we would make the document in such a way that it does protect the interests of the city to the best degree that you can through a legal document.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I'd like to follow up on that, because on that, there was the article in the paper that talked about the mandated improvements, and I wasn't aware of that till I saw it in the paper. But I have a couple questions, because the list of improvements some were sort of off the wall, like building a banquet facility, high-end garage, repairing Adams Street, and people wonder, where did that list come from? Is that something that we developed, or is that from the past, or, and are those the ones they have to spend their $5 million on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, that was part of a plan that was put forth by the current operator as part of their plan to address those issues. Those are not specific that you would have to do those things. It's really, somebody comes in and understands what investments that they would need to make the facility competitive to attract, understanding somebody's going in to get this because they want to make it a successful business, so they want to invest to achieve the best success they can.
Okay, good. Councilman Brown? I'm sorry, are you still back on that, Councilman Ortiz?
Then a follow-up question. Who would agree on what they have to do out there? I mean, because if that list was from the previous operator, how would we come to agreement with what needs to be done then going in?
Ultimately, it's going to be up to them. If we were to include specific performance standards within the contract, we could identify some of those things, but ultimately, it's a private business that is making their investments, and from a statutory perspective, the key is the amount of the investment, not the specific things, but those will be conversations that will be had with an understanding of what the requirements are and what we're looking for from a competitive perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Brown?
I would disagree slightly. I think certain things have been identified, work that needs to be done. You spoke of those things. Those would be included, I would hope. And my question is, within the contract that will be negotiated, is it in your intent on the monetary that that will be specifically stated proportionally over the time in some fashion, understanding that you may have an investment one year and not much in the next and so on, but I guess my concern is getting to the end or towards the end of that time frame, and there's been hemming and hawing on the investment, and now we end up in a situation none of us probably would want to be in.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Brown. I think the key thing here is we have two obligations or two desires. Number one is to fulfill the obligations of the statutory requirements associated with the Star Bond District. Secondly, we want to make sure that we are entering into a relationship with somebody who has both the racing capacity, development capacity, and financial capacity, I guess that's three, to operate this. So I agree with you that there are some specific needs that have been identified out there, and that will be part of the discussions as we identify the specific performance standards that would need to be met as part of the contract. But I want to be very careful not to talk about what the contract will or won't include, because we haven't even gotten to a point that we started negotiating it yet. But your points are understood, and we agree with them.
Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to our wonderful newspaper this last weekend, we've been getting a lot of emails, at least I have been getting emails for and against the park. And one of the emails entertained the fact that we have spent over $200,000 in legal fees and staff time fighting the petition. Can you tell me exactly how much you think we have spent in the legal fees, the, court costs, anything that relate to that, so that I can answer constituency emails that say we're spending so much fighting this?
I think we've spent the last bill that I looked at, I think it's $150,000. I think the more important issue is that we couldn't move forward with a vote until we either had a statute or an appropriate referendum or petition to hold a vote.
If I may, I called the election commissioner today, and he said, and I asked him, how much would it cost to do a special mail ballot? I think 501 did that, and he came to the amount of about $280,000. Did we ever entertain the fact that instead of fighting the petition and the length of time that we've done that this could have been done by a special ballot because 4,000 people signed a petition?
In order to have a legally binding ballot question, you either have to have a statute or petition that authorizes that. That was the whole point of making sure the petition was valid, was in order to have a legally binding vote. So until we had a decision from the courts telling us, yes, you can move forward with this, or no, you can't, we couldn't have had a legally binding vote.
So we as a council could not have, if I may, I'm sorry,
Sure,
I'm doing
go ahead.
dialogue here. We as a council could not have come up with a special election that was not a petition-based to put it before the voters, to see whether or not they wanted us to go through with this.
Two answers to that question. One, not a legally binding vote. And two, we were also subject to a memorandum of understanding that we would take all good faith efforts to move forward with the project. So, and I think I presented to this body a demand letter that threatening litigation if we didn't pursue that, because the attorneys outside of myself, including myself, that had looked at it said, this is not a legally binding petition or referendum. In order to have a legally binding vote, you either have to have a statute that authorizes it or a petition or referendum that authorizes it. This body couldn't have had a legally binding vote without one of those methods of getting to a vote.
Well, if I may follow up, I'm still very negative on how this whole thing transpired, and I am hearing more from constituents about the negativity of the, whether or not the park is even gonna come to fruition and we make it work. I think, it's just like any other large thing that we vote on, whether it's the spending sales tax money on the expo center. I'm just, it's like Councilman Manspeaker said, I think we have to proceed with caution. So, thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Schwartz, I do appreciate those comments. And the fact is, what we have to remember is that reasonable people can disagree on things. This body voted in favor to proceed with the MOU based on the specific facts as they were known at that particular time. And certainly, as a project goes forward, people certainly have the right to change their position based on their better understanding of the position or their understanding of the people and their concerns. What we've tried to do from the beginning is allow this body to understand the details and help make the most informed decision possible. And I believe that we have continued to remain there, and we've talked about communication, we've talked about process, we've talked about timing. I don't think there's anybody, especially and including me at the top of the list, who wouldn't have maybe done some things differently, especially from a rollout of this and from a communication perspective. But at the end of the day, not the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, the city went into this to address a specific financial issue. And we outlined what those challenges were and what the solutions were. And this body made a determination to proceed and to enter into that MOU. And we have steadfastly stayed focused on that particular area, not because it was comfortable, not because we enjoyed it, but because we were legally obligated to do so. So that's why we're where we're at today. Now, we're at a position now where we are going to bring this forward. We will seek discussion and direction from this council starting in April. There will be some different people sitting here. Our first step will be to outline everything we know about it, lay out the details, bring people up to speed. I think we're going to suggest that we have one or more public meetings where people can provide input on this. And then we would want to come back to this body for additional discussion and direction. And if direction is proceeded, if direction is provided for us to proceed down this road still, we will outline the plan for marketing and selling the bonds and to enter into a relationship with the new operator. So that's where we stand today.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will we wait until after that time period to see if they appeal or not with the Supreme Court?
I would, as we move forward, I would obviously advise this body, as the legal issues develop, that there is nothing at this point or that I can foresee that would keep us from moving forward. I mean, the certification of the Supreme Court could be years. It's not,
Yeah.
with district court, it was a pretty short time.
No, I
Yeah,
understand the
with-
process, but
with-
I'm just asking.
Yeah, if I get new information, I'll advise this body on legal steps that need to be taken, but as of now, there's nothing that's been filed. No stay is before us, so there's nothing preventing this body from moving forward.
Councilman Heller?
Given what you're sharing, I think a lot of people want to know how that means we will get by from here to there, if you will. With the MOU and the original timeline, there was an expectation that Mr. Irwin was voluntarily getting out of the racing business and would be gone no later than the 1st of February, and that somebody else would be in place running the track when NHRA came in May, and then and we saw some news accounts that Mr. Irwin, and with these delays, had gone ahead. We booked NHRA probably last summer, and that other races are scheduled. Who's in charge during this period? It sounds like we are extending some time to work with the new owners, prospective owners.
Mayor and Councilmember Hiller, Raymond Irwin and Jayhawk Racing are the current owners of Heartland Park. There is a relationship that exists with Core First Bank. Core First Bank has certain legal rights based on the agreements that exist between them. I think right now, we are working towards looking at the 2015 NHRA race and how can we ensure that that happens in a manner that doesn't have any negative financial impact on the city. Mr. Sublette has been working with NHRA's attorneys and also trying to come up with a protection that is part of the discussions with the potential operators and also with Mr. Irwin and with Core First. We understand that we're not going to have this deal done before the NHRA race. So that's why we're trying to deal with that as a one-off. But at the same time, we believe that it's absolutely vital to educate the council and understand that there will be new members of the council in April. Have some public meetings, provide an opportunity for us to share why, what, how, all of that sort of information. But more importantly, provide people an opportunity to be heard and to share with this body as to what they believe that they would like to see. Ultimately, bring it back to the body for a discussion, which I anticipate will be a lively discussion, and direction to proceed. If the direction is to proceed, then we will outline the specific plan to sell the bonds and to engage the new operator going forward. But beyond that, we don't have any more specifics.
You know, Councilman Schmidt?
Yeah, I just want to make a clarification in the statement that you just made. You said that Jayhawk Racing is the current owner of Heartland Park, when they're the current operator of Heartland Park and the owner of the reversionary interest, which is, every article that's been written on this says that we're purchasing Heartland Park, which we already own. And the reversionary interest would cause a real estate transaction 10 years from now, which is why owning the reversionary interest doesn't allow you to sell the park, and why owning the park with somebody else owning the reversionary interest doesn't allow us to sell the park, which is the central issue of this whole debate. And I think it's the point that has been missed in the media and on this council and in our communication the entire time. And I just want to make clear, and I know it when we're talking about the legal versions of reversionary interest and actual title ownership, that we're clear that we are not buying Heartland Park. We already own Heartland Park. That it's the reversionary interest that's at stake here.
Okay,
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. We do have a person signed for public comment on this, and perhaps this would be a good time to take care of that. Rick Taylor.
Choose to pass.
I'm sorry? Pass? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, then we'll continue with the discussion. Is there other presentation or items? All right, then we'll just continue other questions. Councilwoman Hiller?
Regarding what you just proposed about the public hearings, I know we're feeling our way step by step as these various elements of this unfurl, but in terms of the expectations of people who wanted to vote, would it be realistic for all of us to start focusing on those public hearings that you discussed as the place for people to weigh in on ideas and so on? Is that where we're going with this?
I just wanted to make a clarification. We're not talking, I know they're kind of synonymous, but we're not having, it wouldn't be public hearings. It would be public engagement meetings, town hall meetings.
Okay.
I just want to make that clarification, I think, along the lines of Councilman
These legal
Schmidt.
types. Okay.
I know. And I would defer to the city manager on the second part of that, just getting the input from the public.
The objective would be to provide that public engagement and to provide people an opportunity. I think for those who want a public vote, I guess that's always an option available outside of the confines of the MOU, if this body going forward wanted to do something. But, at this point, I think that we are trying to bring this body to a point where they can make the most informed decision pertaining how to proceed, and staff will follow accordingly.
Thank you.
Other comments? We'll see there. Sorry, Councilwoman DeLisa.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been one of the most difficult situations that we've had to work with. City Attorney Sublette described that we have been in 11 meetings that have been out to the public. I can tell you there's been numerous meetings that we had prior to having the public meetings. Could we have done better with communication? Could we have is something that when we look back, every single person that is sitting here right now at the table are individuals that are working for the betterment of our city. I can assure every single person that is outside, taking a look at the situation that we're trying to work with Heartland Park, has to understand that we are trying to operate based on what we could do to mitigate the losses that our constituents would have. When we received the information, like very well stated, Councilman Schmidt discussed, in order for us to be able to move forward in any fashion, we need to ensure that the reversionary clause that exists right now with that racetrack is eliminated. That has been the core and the center of all of our discussions. My heart breaks when I hear that 4,000 people, and I read the emails and I get the calls, wanted to vote on this issue. Because one of the things that we push for on a regular basis is for our people in our city to vote. And to hear that there is such a passion for people to become engaged in the process is something that is just wonderful, because it means that you guys are paying attention. The difficulty in this matter is that legally, there is no standing for us to go ahead and affect the vote. Legally, we cannot affect the vote. At this point in time, the best thing that we can do, even though we cannot have a vote, is ensure that now that we have the opportunity to have these public hearings, that you come to both be heard and also to hear what the city is going to be able to provide to you with regards to the information that you are seeking. Ask questions. I have had wonderful experience when people ask questions. Our staff has been wonderful at replying. So I just encourage everybody in this next run around, make sure that you ask your questions. Make sure that you attend the meetings. Councilwoman Hiller held 2 meetings at Tellers, if I am, Terry's. At Terry's, Tellers is close. At Terry's, to make sure that people were able to go ahead and provide input. From my perspective, I want to let you know that we're all listening. This is not an easy solution, but we're trying to do the best that we can to mitigate $5 million being put on the backs of our constituents. So I just want to thank our team for the very hard work. And like Councilwoman Schwartz stated, $150,000 that have been spent in legal fees. Although it's not easy, again, we're dealing with what's the lesser of both evils. Would have been much better than having $200,000 on a vote that would not have been valid and would have put the city in a very precarious legal position. So thank you all for the work that we're doing, and I'm looking forward to see how this is going to pan out.
Thank you.